unstable. So if a new group comes out in their first year and says, hey, we want a shot at it, I believe they would have to show as well why we should trust them, how they're stabilized. And, MSA has been here for several years. They've come back, they've supported the community, and I see it as an opportunity with coaches returning. It's great. It means that program helped them a lot, and it helps keep a younger generation here, which we really need to remember, that we need that for our growth. I've already mentioned it. Kids thinking that they're not good enough. And I know Director Kelly said, well, they could join AYSO or the Eagles. However, that may not be the case. They may have friends on MSA. The parents might not have the funds to put them somewhere or have the time for the volunteer hours. Think of how stretched each person is at this point, and it is getting thinner and thinner. Parents are working, and with COVID as well, trying to make ends meet. You have parents both working jobs, trying to find childcare. It's expensive, and I think sometimes we lose sight of that not everyone is privileged. I want to listen to the youth. The youth are our future. I love the civic engagement. I love that the kids are here, because that instills something in them that they will carry the rest of their lives. They're fighting for something that they believe in. And, I don't want to damper their spirits. They came here, they showed what they want, and I don't want to stifle their voice. And also, not approving this as a CSO, the last time we had one was, in 2008? I think there's room for growth. There is definitely, and I understand the space issues and the hours on each zone and whatnot. But as Director Roberts had mentioned, it would be great if they could at least play their games there, and if they alternate practices and whatnot, everyone can make a sacrifice to make a better community. And really, they're not taking away from the soccer community. If anything, they're enhancing it. They're building a community. They are, they're supporting one another. We all want to support one another and to see us all thrive, and we can all become stronger from it. It also stifles new organizations or new ideas that might come forth, but I believe that MSA is good enough as one of, I believe it was the MSAFC Boys 2010 captain. I know we are small, but I think we are good enough. And they are. Why not share the fields? And yes, I understand all the technicalities behind it, but we can make this work.
Thank you.
I have a major concern with additional community service organizations. And I think Director Dunsfeld's got it right with the policy. I think we need to address the policy. I think we also need to address the usage by zone. Hopefully with the new system, we might be able to do something differently with that. They are a community, an organization, but that doesn't mean that we have to make them a CSO for them to be able to utilize the fields. If space is available. I don't know if I know we're going to look at a new system down the road here, aren't we, for reservations and things, and if we can do something with that. I do understand the zoning, I understand the electricity. Thank you to a former board member that we had. I got drilled on what we needed to do with electricities and things, so I very well remember that. But I don't want to open the floodgates for community service organizations that think that the door is open and we're going to let everybody in because we've done one. I think we need to wait, do a policy, figure out what we want to do and what we can do. I think that's one of the biggest things. And yes, we have grown, but I think we as a board and as an agency need to stop and say, wait a minute, we need to see where we're headed. We need to see what our facilities are. You know, we are facility poor here. We just don't have enough facilities of anything to serve the people of our district. And we're possibly getting more and more as the developments come in. So I think this is a good place that we just stop, figure out what our policy is going to be, figure out how we're going to do this, and then we can move forward.
Thank you. Director Kelly.
I agree with Elaine on this. I think this is a little premature. I wish it had been done differently. We have 27 parks. After discussing it, it's possible that things could change. Here's my main issue, and it's always been my issue. I've brought it up many times, and somehow it just kind of just goes right over the head of individuals. And I'm not talking about anybody here tonight. And that is that service groups are the creation of the district. They're not something that you put a bunch of forms out on the counter and anybody that wants to comes and applies and has the potential of becoming a service group. The service group does something that the district wants to do but can't do. And so, as Director Dransfeld said, anybody may not be able to just come in and qualify. They got to make their case. And one of the reasons, one of the two reasons on that application form for denial is that the needs of the district are already being met. Tonight, I thought it was an excellent presentation, but I didn't think that the case was made clearly enough for me that there is something different that's going to be provided that the district doesn't already have. For me, that's the case you would have had to make. I agree with the other directors that the policy, I mean, I know what happened in 2006 when I was first elected to the board. The document that's in the file came under the John Williamson administration. He's the one that came up with that. Later on, when Dan came on board, that policy was looked at and rejected, and nobody ever heard of it again. The whole 75% thing. We never discussed that again. As you recall, Lanny, you used to write it at the beginning. You had to get all these rosters of all these kids and check all these addresses, and then all of a sudden you didn't have to do that anymore. And that was because that particular policy had been rejected. Now, maybe the fault of the district for, and maybe there is documentation somewhere. I don't know. I don't know where all the documents get placed. But the fact of the matter is that policy was never followed, ever. So my opinion is that the case has just not been made for another service group. We all know that having multiple service groups in the same sport or activity leads to disagreements and a lot of time spent by the board. This is not our first rodeo. And what can happen when you have competing interests for the same thing. And that's all I have to say.
Okay. That means I get to bat last as per usual.
Director Roberts wants to speak.
I thought you already spoke. Okay, go ahead.
I asked questions, but I'd like to say that I believe to the contrary, that a case was made today, and I believe that there is a place for MSA. And I know this because there are many different philosophies for different organizations, as I've said before. Ms. Rosling talked about playing 50% of the time. That's something that I appreciate as a daughter who's on United, and I know that other people in the past have scoffed at that or said, you know, people are on these teams because they want their kid to play more. They want to see more playing time, and I don't know what parent doesn't want to see their kid have more playing time, regardless of what it is. And I think that there is a place between only the very best play and everyone plays. I think that there is a purpose served by that. I think that you know, we all have talked about resources and the tragedy of the commons, and when everyone wants one resource. And as we go through our policies and as we read through one of the next agenda items, it talks about district board members being involved in making the policy and leaving the administration part to the administrators and the district staff. And the way that I view this is, if the board sees value in a community service organization, then they grant that status. And then administration and staff handle the logistics of scheduling and allocating field use based on policies. That's how I see it. And with regards to the district already providing the service of competitive and recreational leagues, the district isn't providing that. The community service organizations are the Eagles and ASO. So it doesn't necessarily say that it says something the district can't provide. It doesn't specify how many CSOs we should have, or essentially what sort of items we need to check off in order for a CSO to be designated. It's essentially the will of the board and whether they see value in the service that's provided. After that, the rest of it is up to district staff to administer. So I do have a little bit of difference with regard to that. And I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. The district has a very clear policy on community service groups, and it's had it since 2004. The policy statement says, as I read a little earlier, organizations which provide a community recreation program which might otherwise be provided by the district will be considered for community service group status. The district doesn't exist to support groups. Our responsibility is to make sure recreational needs of the community are met. We have found that having single groups as our partners as community service groups is a cost-effective way to make sure community groups organize to operate sports programs the district is not equipped to provide. We have single groups for girls softball, boys baseball, basketball, swim team, track, and youth football. The only sport we have multiple groups in is soccer, and that is because AYSO programs serve recreational players. Eagles Club Soccer supported highly competitive play against teams from other areas. Both teams used different facilities prior to the construction of PV fields. They have worked cooperatively since its construction, even as the nature of both programs' play has evolved. It is very important to note that the district approves group when it sees an unmet need for a recreational program the community wants. It is not a status any organization can ask for in order to gain a share of participants in an existing sport. The form requesting community service status has a number of requirements for documentation. It also states, and it's right down here highlighted in yellow at the bottom of the form, the Board of Directors may reject the organization from becoming a community service group based on A, existing programs already servicing community needs, and B, available facilities. Soccer is already one of the best supported sports activities in Camarillo, so there is no likelihood the district might have to provide it. It is also clear community needs are already well served with 2 organizations sharing a facility that serves a couple thousand players. Most importantly, the facilities being requested for use are already being programmed to the maximum number of hours compatible with maintaining healthy field conditions. Both groups playing at PV Fields are already utilizing alternative sites for practice and play, and if additional usage hours are available, they would use them more. An application for the status was made in 2015. Based on the district guidelines, the staff denied the request. Tonight, the board is reconsidering this application based on a request to agendize it by Director Roberts and Dransfeld. When the application was considered in 2015, no member of the Maka family spoke to the board utilizing the families to support their case. No incorporation or financial information was provided. This time we received documentation about the organization, which has identified additional areas of concern for me. The bylaws state the organization's name is Lifestream Ministries International. There is no mention of Maka Soccer Club anywhere in the bylaws. The purpose of the organization is to develop Christ-centered character through sports, education, training, competitive play, and Christian outreach by serving the spiritual and emotional needs of youth. Not one of the many emails I received in support of this application mentioned Christianity, nor have any of the people I talk with the organization suggest there is any Christian component to the program. The bylaws also state that Steve Maka shall have a permanent seat on the board of directors until voluntary resignation or death. Section 8 of the bylaw states the salaries of the officers, if any, shall be fixed from time to time by resolution of the board of directors. Section 15 states directors serving the organization in any other capacity, such as staff, are allowed to receive compensation. Lifestream Sports Ministries, at least on paper, unlike the non-religious volunteer-managed nonprofit organizations the district has granted community service to. Their status as a Christian organization is problematic because the district cannot grant favorable status to a religious organization. We can rent use of our facilities to religious organizations, but we may not give them preferential treatment. It is not unusual for a business to have a permanent member of the board so the founder can retain control of the organization. This is not a component of community-based nonprofit organizations. The nonprofit volunteer-managed organization the district partners with do not pay their directors, and therefore directors are not empowered to set the level of compensation they receive. The IRS Statement of Status dated August 2014 states Life Sports Ministries is a public charity under provisions 170B, 1A, and 6. It further states the contributions to this organization are deductible. This is typical of a church, but not so when people are paying the organization for training and playing a sport. On page 370 of our packet, which is Life Sports Ministries 2019 IRS Form 990, under Part 5, Section 7, for organizations that may receive tax-deductible organizations, question A reads, did the organization receive a payment in excess of $75 made partly as a contribution and partly for goods and services required to the payer? This question is answered as a no. Based on the financial data submitted, most of Lifestream Ministry International's income is registration fees. That is inconsistent with the answer to that question. On page 371, Section A, question 2 asks, did any officer, director, trustee, or key employee have a family relationship or a business relationship with any other officer, director, trustee, or any key employee? The question is answered no. Since Steve Maka is both officer and director, and Brian Maka is certainly a key employee, this is also inaccurate. It is also my understanding that Brianna Maka is also a paid coach at Maka Soccer. The financial reports show payments to a company named Compass Point, which Mr. Maka confirmed, for business services. Clearly, there is a lot of financial intermingling between the Maka family and the business they put their name on, and that does not appear to have been reported accurately on tax forms. Clearly, this organization is, at least on paper, looks nothing like our typical community service group. It appears, from a fiscal perspective, it appears to be more than just named as a family business. It's being run with major personal financial benefit to those in control. It is operating inconsistent with claims made on tax statements, which I find very troubling. Because the district is in no risk of needing to provide youth soccer programs, there is no reason for us to even consider this application. The review has been made due to requests by 2 board members. The district already has 2 well-established programs serving thousands of players with a wide range of competitive and recreational soccer programs. The fields the Maka wants to use are already fully utilized, with existing groups using those fields in addition to other facilities to meet their program's needs. Over 50% requirement for other fields in AYSO's case. The request made for almost 1/3 of the available field use time, which has been modified during tonight's discussion, with only 125 players, is completely unreasonable. Almost all club team games have half the players in each game from outside areas. Of special concern is that any reduction in play by ASO teams enable more club team play, which means fewer Camarillo teams will be playing at PV fields. To force the existing community service groups sharing PV fields and partnering with the district with very substantial financial support for over a decade to give up 800 hours of field time MSA is requesting for 125 players would be very unfair to them. It appears to me the Maka family soccer business wants to better be able to grow their business and make more money, and I'm all for that. There's no problem. I have no problem with you guys being successful with your business. Their website even promotes the idea of outside teams joining. But the more I look at it, the more uncomfortable I am with their organization from a legal and fiscal perspective. Adding a 3rd soccer group, reducing the use by existing groups, the first time we would have ever done such a thing, would open a Pandora's box to other soccer clubs and other sports organizations that would want to ask for their fair share of the use of PV fields. This includes organizations for other sports that already have community service status within the district. Our policy is clear and has been for decades. New groups must address unmet recreational needs, and there needs to be space available for them. The unmet recreational needs here we have now are pickleball. It's not more soccer groups. Both of those requirements are clearly stated on the application form, as they were in 2015 when it was rejected. A approval of the Maka soccer application would no doubt make many people here very happy, and I love making people happy. But doing that would ignore district policies that have proven to serve us well for decades and result in a domino effect of problems for the district and working with every youth sports organization in Camarillo. Once you put everybody's field space and times up for grabs, then it's going to be a free-for-all, and we're going to have these conversations every month. I urge my fellow board members to reject this application. Is there a motion?
I'll motion to approve MSA's application to be a CSO.
I second.
Is there any further discussion? Karen, please call the roll.
Director Roberts,
Aye.
Director Dransfeld,
Aye.
Director Magner,
No.
Director Kelly,
No.
Chairman Malloy.
No, the motion fails 3-2. Okay, we've been going for 2.5 hours now, so let's take a 10-minute break. I showed set 8:25. Let's break till 8:35. 8B, consideration and approval of preliminary fiscal year 2021-2022 budgets for the general fund, the assessment district fund, and Quimby fee fund. And that means it's Leo's turn.
Good evening, Chairman Malloy, members of the board. Tonight I'm going to bring before you the fiscal year 21-22 budget for Funds 10, Fund 20, and 30, also known as General Fund, the Assessment District, and the Quimby Fund. This is going to be the preliminary approval. In July will be the adopted, is when the adoption will take place. Here's a timeline of our budget workshop. On April 24th, we had our first budget workshop where all the department managers presented. We have presented the Quimby as well as the Assessment District. On May 12th, we had a budget wrap-up. That was to address any changes or requests from the Board of Directors. This evening, June 2nd, we're doing the approval of the preliminary budget, and our board meeting in July on the 7th will be a public hearing and the adoption of the final budget for fiscal year 21-22. A little bit of background on our funds. We have Fund 10, which is the general fund. The common resources of that fund is our property tax, our program fees, rentals, and our grants. Fund 20 is a semi-restricted fund. It's the assessment tax, which I spoke of earlier this evening. And we have Fund 30, the restricted. Those are the park in lieu fees, and those are fees that are paid by the developers. A little bit about each of our departments. The administration consists of finance, customer service, grants management, the foundation, human resources, IT, and analytics. The recreation is our aquatic center, sports, camps and classes, senior services, special events, and marketing. And parks is our park rangers, facility maintenance and operations, capital improvement, projects, and program support. This year, I'm pleased to say that our budget is balanced on all three funds, and our capital improvements for the upcoming fiscal year will be $693,000 in projects, and we have $1.4 million that we're going to spend in our Quimby funds for projects. The district continues to focus on enhancing and rebuilding the community facilities, recreation programs that were affected by COVID-19, which has been taking place for the last 15 months. We're continuing to strive progress toward fiscal accountability, and we're serving almost 80,000 in constituents. Some of our accomplishments for 2021 was we secured a $2 million in developer fees. We updated are in the process of updating our strategic plan. We completed the Springfield Dog Park rehab. We completed the energy audit partnership with California Energy Commission, and that will enable us to have improvement for our lighting as well as savings in our electric bill. Some of the challenges the district is going to be facing in this upcoming fiscal year is the question, is the worst behind us in this crisis? We're prepared to fully reopen. It looks like we might get to reopen June 15th. We're waiting to see what happens with that. And what's the expectation from the public? Is the public comfortable with coming out? Are they ready to come back and resume life as it was before COVID? We're also dealing with the rising cost of our CalPERS unfunded liability, our health care, the minimum wage increase that continues to go up, and our liability insurance. Again, I was happy to pleased to see that we were able to balance the budget with our keeping in mind that we only kept our revenue about 75% of where it was for fiscal year 18-19, because we were not sure what the public's going to be doing when we do fully open back up. With that being said, our Fund 10 was at 8.314 in revenue. Our expenses were at 8.286 in expenses, which gives us a little bit of a cushion of 28,000. Again, our capital improvements for Fund 10 for this upcoming fiscal year will be $693,000 in projects. Here is a graph to show what our 2021 budget versus the 21-22 budget looks like. We have our tax apportionment, we have the rec and park revenue, the personnel, services and supplies, and our capital. So during the budget workshops, if you notice here, we have a column called requested, proposed, and approved. Requested is what the board or what the staff brought to you on April 24th. The proposed is what the staff brought back to you with your request and changes on May 12th. And the approved is what we're looking at tonight. The property tax, we did do an increase of the 2% per the Board of Directors request, and that stays the same for the proposed and the approved. And our personnel, again, looking at the requested, proposed, and approved, you can see those numbers, all three areas have changed. With those changes came, we're filling a Grounds 1 position, a Grounds 2 position, we're reclassing a rec coordinator to a development analyst, and we're increasing the rec specialist part-time year-round to a rec specialist full-time. Looking at services and supplies, we decided due to AB 339, we thought we would have to have a translator, but it was later learned that special districts were not going to have to adhere to that, so we removed the translator in our professional services. We increased our uniform allowance to allow shirts to be purchased for uniforms for the staff, and we added some funds to the employee morale. Moving on to our capital projects. Again, this is a graph to show you how we have processed through the last 5 years or 4 years with our capital projects, beginning with 17-18, 18-19, 19-20, 21, and then this coming year, 21-22. Our capital items, as you can see, those two changed as we met frequently with our budget wrap-up, and and then this evening. So we again, we removed the Room 7 virtual meeting room. Again, that was related to the translator, the AB 339. We've added the lighting project, which is the loan. We're going to be getting a carpet for the senior center, and we're upgrading the soundboard in the senior center. These are pictures of the projects as far as what they look like now. You can see, starting from left to right, we have the LED lighting for the tennis courts, the Mission Oaks parking lot, the pool vacuum, the fleet, the bingo console, conference room, HVAC, soundboard, Springville, the lower parking lot, the carpet for the senior center, and then the ADA transition plan, and the lighting project for the loan. Here is a chart to show you what each one of these projects are expected to cost. They're spread over 2 slides. And here's the second slide. And then we have one carryover project for fiscal year 2021. We had the inflatable system for recreation of $5,500, but due to COVID, we didn't see the need to purchase it and just put it in storage. So we're carrying, that item was approved last fiscal year, but we're carrying that expense over so that recreation can purchase that in this upcoming year. Moving on to Fund 30, our Quimby fees. Again, the Quimby Act was imposed in 1975. It was designed to ensure adequate open space, and it gave authority of passage of land-dedicated ordinances only to cities and counties. And it set fees, or it gave land to public agencies to provide park and recreational services for the community. The money can be used for improvements to the park, community centers, rec facilities, trails, open space, or increase the capacity of what we currently have. These are the projects that are up and coming for this next fiscal year: the community center kitchen remodel, the site of a future pickleball sports complex, and the Arneal Ranch Park renovation. These, again, this table shows what pricing we're looking at for the pickleball sports complex. Again, we have 2 projects that were approved in fiscal year 2021 that will be carried over into fiscal year 21-22. Moving on to the Assessment District, Fund 20. It was formed in 2001 due to limited revenues and worry of potential shortfalls. It was created to improve park maintenance, fund future projects, and for also improvement on our projects. It was formed for the district in 15-16. It is increasing this upcoming fiscal year by 2.25%, which is a $96 increase. You'll see 96-cent increase. You'll see on your property tax bill. So it'll be to $43.52. That's for one full benefit. Condos, multifamily residential, mobile homes, and commercials, those are prorated at a different rate than a single-family residence. So for the assessment district, we're anticipating 1.209 in revenue with an expense of 1.118, which will give us a cushion of $60,000 if we have anything that we can spend in the assessment district that we need to. We've got that little bit of cushion to fall back on. So again, this table shows our revenue, our personnel, our supplies and services, and our total expense. If you notice in supplies and services, it has dropped a little bit. That is due to the landscaping contract. It was less this year, but it will be going up next year. So having that $60,000 cushion will help us. If we don't have to touch that, that will help us as far as carryover cash for fiscal year 22-23. So this evening, I'm asking that the board approve the preliminary budget for fiscal year 21-22 for all three funds, be general fund, assessment district, and the Quimby fund. Any questions?
Thank you, Leo.
Uh-huh.
You almost made my heart disconnect when you said $96 instead of 96
I know.
cents.
So sorry, I'm sure I...
But hey, it's checking to make sure we're awake.
Okay.
And frankly, it's hard to keep us awake on this topic because we've been working on this for so long, and I know you have too. Are there any questions from the board for Leo?
Just like, I like the way you say carryover cash.
Yeah. Does have a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Okay, if there's no questions, I need a motion to approve the preliminary fiscal year budgets.
So moved.
I'll second.
Please call the roll.
Director Dransfeld,
Aye.
Director Magner,
Aye.
Director Kelly.
Aye.
Director Roberts.
Aye.
Chairman Malloy.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Item C, consideration and selection of district recreation management system vendor. Anthony.
Good evening, board. You guys get me one more time. So tonight, the item in front of you is the selection of a new recreation management system software as a service provider for the district. The current district recreation management system is ActiveNet, as has been mentioned many times over the last few years. See, we've been under contract with ActiveNet since 2005, which as far as I can tell is one of the longest professional services contract the district has held in duration for almost any service, actually. I haven't found one that's gone longer except for agreements between the cities and the school districts and the park district. It's currently a transaction-based pricing structure, meaning that whenever there's a registration or a reservation on the platform, the district takes a chunk of that registration cost and pays it to ActiveNet. In that it not only includes credit card processing fees, but also things along the lines of something called a technology fee, which basically is a fee that they take out for usage of the platform. And also, if we process checks through the platform for items that are housed in ActiveNet, there's a certain fee for that. There's a lot of fees based on the transactions itself. And part of the reason for that is because ActiveNet is, in fact, owned by a credit card processing company. So that is where they derive most of their revenue from. I would say, I'm going to start this by saying most platforms that we're going to be evaluating tonight or looking at tonight have moved away from that model in the last few years. So during evaluating the ActiveNet contract, the district realized it's probably paying between $10,000 and $15,000 more than we could be paying with another platform. So the board approved a request for a proposal in February of 2021. Staff received 6 responses, and after thorough review by a large group of staff is recommending SmartRec by Amelia Enterprises for selection. So a little bit further, a little bit more background. In 2005, the district transitioned from RecWare to ActiveNet. Some facility data was transferred from RecWare to ActiveNet. So in fact, some of the facility data in ActiveNet currently is from prior to 2005 itself. ActiveNet actually then later purchased RecWare, which is, so a lot of the systems were familiar to the staff at the time. The district has also used ActiveNet as our cash receipting system. And that's actually not uncommon amongst other park districts, that they use the frontline POS system as their cash receipting system and not necessarily the accounting system. The district realized at a certain point during the last 15 years that the fee charges ActiveNet was charging was causing the district to lose, or at least lose some revenue. And necessarily, I'm not sure if there was any analysis put into that at the time. I could not find any record of such analysis, but some transactions such as the senior center trips, registrations, things along those lines in the actual senior center building were removed or were not sent through ActiveNet to avoid paying the fees. So you had a system of hand payment for certain things, in which you literally put cash or checks in an envelope and bring it over and input it as a journal entry into the accounting system directly. And then aquatic center memberships, lap swims, things along those lines were also taken out of ActiveNet or not put into ActiveNet at all. So ActiveNet did not include a complete picture of the total recreation services being provided by the district, as those items were never recorded in the system itself. So in 2019, staff analyzed fees and expenses during the budget prep, as always, and ActiveNet fees were higher than anticipated, or considered higher than anticipated. And while district programming has become more popular in the last few years, more public participation therefore equals higher fees. It was realized that, or not realized, it was understood that there might be a better deal out there because the staff thought we should not be penalized for doing better, essentially. So, and also in 2020, Active gave notice that the fees would be raised substantially. This is possibly due to the fact that the district's contract with Active has not really changed in the last 15 years, so it's potentially due to review on their end that they're raising their fees. And so, in order to respond to all this, the district submitted, or published, excuse me, the RFP in 2021, and in that RFP, the fee structure itself that was preferred by the district was not specified, so as to not exclude Active from proposing a new contract. Active did submit a proposal, plus five other platforms: Civic Plus, Perfect Mind, SmartRec, Capture Point, and RecDesk. And also, the district staff reviewed about eight total proposals, so we were pretty happy with the response there. So to arrive at a recommendation, staff evaluated the platform based on expected base services that were included in the request for proposals. Two proposals after that initial proposal review were selected to move into interviews. Management staff interviewed both vendors, or both representatives from both vendors, and then 10 staff participated in 4 separate demonstrations. And then the platforms during those demonstrations were evaluated on the expected base services and specific staff questions to hone in on certain issues we saw within the proposals. Those questions focused on the following items: integration, user interface, reporting, reservations and registrations, finance, and the quality of the presentation itself. So the two proposals selected for interviews were SmartRec and Perfect Mind. And staff's initial overall impressions of SmartRec to start with were that the user face with SmartRec was by far superior to any of the other platforms that were evaluated. In the examples that they gave, they integrated seamlessly with other agencies' websites. It was as though you were using the agency website to reserve their own programs and facilities. Their e-commerce focus essentially meant that their number one priority is the experience of the user and making it as easy as possible for the member of the public to fulfill the wish or the desire that they came to the website for. The user and management interface, or the back end of the software, is the same on either side. So if a customer service representative is called upon to make a reservation or registration, they're looking at the exact same screen as a member of the public is. So they're able to troubleshoot things live, or they can do those things for them and see the exact same thing that the customer might see. Additionally, items that I put in quotes here, plugins, they're not truly plugins, but they essentially are third-party software items that the district could use as a part of SmartRec. They allow the district to essentially customize the platform. Some of them are free, some of them are not, and they're obviously use case specific. But the way that they've integrated them into SmartRec is that they share the similar or same information, so that way a customer, for example, can put in health information for a camp, and that could be fulfilled by a third-party process called, I think it's called Privet or Private, and it essentially keeps that information separate, or it's very sensitive information, so it keeps it secret and separate, other than the district having to do a paper form. This would be done digitally on their end. SmartRec wouldn't necessarily handle that information, but it plugs in directly with that item. However, one downside to SmartRec that staff did recognize is that they did not have what the district did put as optional in the proposal as strong personnel management features. So things like managing timesheets, time cards, volunteer management, and shift management, those items weren't immediately capable within the platform. However, during the presentations, the SmartRec vendor did actually take time to show that there are workarounds that you could potentially use. However, staff did recognize that wasn't an ideal solution. It could be done, though. Perfect Mind was the other vendor that was selected as for demonstrations, and they do have a similar user interface to SmartRec. However, a less seamless website integration. They rely on very standardized sized forms and things along those lines, and they may not fit every website from what we were able to gather during our research. The reservation process was hindered a little bit by that, in that sometimes certain frames didn't quite fit within the window that you were working with. However, once during the reservation registration process that we were going through to evaluate these, we were able to complete those processes, but it wasn't as easy as SmartRec. User and transaction fees were not well supported in compared to SmartRec, but they were both supported by both platforms, but they were not as well explained or as well integrated in the registration process for the customer. They did, however, boast a more sophisticated backend than SmartRec, not as staff user-friendly, but probably similar to the way ActiveNet is currently set up. So staff was very familiar with the items that they were presenting, so it wasn't necessarily much of a barrier. However, it did present a few more obstacles in regards to training. They did include much stronger personnel management features. So there were specific modules and items that were dedicated to the management of time cards, management of schedules, and things along those lines that SmartRec didn't offer. And they were native in this regard, meaning that they were immediately available from day one in a way that made sense. And then limited integration with other software. And this item is probably likely not forthcoming, or the improvement is not necessarily forthcoming, and I put that there because Perfect Mind approached the idea of integration through a much different mindset than SmartRec did, in that Perfect Mind was more of considered a one-stop shop. If you would like to include work order software, like we have with Productive Parks, they would rather sell you their own solution, which was an add-on that you could potentially use. However, SmartRec, on the other hand, actually currently integrates the calendar completely with Productive Parks. So if you put a reservation in on SmartRec, it actually automatically appears in Productive Parks, and the opposite is true as well. So there is some synergy there, and I hate to use that word, but there is some synergy with SmartRec that didn't exactly exist with Perfect Mind. However, they had a lot of the abilities to cover those things, but they were most likely going to be in-house. They didn't necessarily use existing district resources that the district's already expended funds on. So overall, fiscal impact was considered last. And the primary reason for that is because a lot of these platforms came in and quoted very similar prices. The district staff was very, very concerned with overall user friendliness and staff user friendliness as well. So both vendors, in this case that staff used as the top two, they bill identically. Basically, the setup cost consideration would be 50% upfront, 50% at product rollout, and then a subscription fee based on a monthly rolling basis. As you can see here, I've added plus hardware on both of these. If the pool, for example, is to move to a membership-based system that we already currently have a membership-based, it's on paper though. If we were to move to like a punch card or a scan card, there would be a scanner and a cash register, for example, that would go with that. And so those would be extra, and that could potentially cost anywhere between $800 to $1,500, depending on the platform that's used. So those items would be considered extra. The SmartRec year one rollout, the rollout is considered $15,000, so $7,500 up front, $7,500 at day one of operation, and $24,588 every year after that on a monthly basis. Perfect Mind, you're looking at, I believe it was just under $17,000 for the rollout, and that would be billed once again 50% up front, 50% on day one rollout. The SmartRec contract was quoted for 3 years. Perfect Mind was quoted for 3 years, or was quoted for 2 years. However, they acknowledged during correspondence that their primary agreement lengths are between 3 and 5 years. So it could be extrapolated that this price here would likely be very similar to this as well. And they're based off of expected revenue. So their subscription tier is tiered based on the revenue that you achieve. And we used revenue numbers from 2018-19 to give an accurate picture of where we might be at in a non-COVID year. Additionally, at the end of these contract periods, they would be able to evaluate your actual usage. And in the previous year, if your usage was much lower than what we anticipated, which we estimated between about $1.25 and $1.5 million in transactions through the system. If it was lower than that, they could potentially move it down to a lower bracket or up, depending on where you go, of course. So at this time, staff is recommending that the board approve and authorize the general manager to enter into a 3-year agreement with Amelia Enterprises for the implementation and use of the SmartRec recreation management system. The agreement is not in the packet. It's still being worked over with the attorneys from both sides. However, the agreement substantially includes the items that are in the proposals. And there are no, essentially, I would say there are no surprises in that particular agreement. And I can take any questions on either software if you would like.
Director Dransfeld, as the one more member of the board that's actually used recreation management software, do you have any questions?
What was your experience like, Anthony? Did you use it at all?
So I deliberately took myself out of the process as much as I could. So I use ActiveNet primarily on an academic basis, I guess you could say. I use it primarily for research. The primary obstacle we have with ActiveNet is the fact that that not everything has been put into the system. And that's not necessarily a failing of ActiveNet. However, I will say that it's driven by the ActiveNet's fee structure. And there's a reason I think that these systems have, all but one actually, has moved away from a transaction-based fee structure. ActiveNet was the only proposal that actually said, well, you could stick with this, and then they gave 4 other options as well, which were all supposedly slightly less expensive than what we were currently paying, but they still have a transaction-based component that was a little hard to anticipate, where that would go. So overall, I would say Active is a really robust system. It's dated. They have a platform kind of basis that doesn't always update for every user, for every client. You have to request it. They charge essentially for almost every request you have to do custom work or things like that, which is normal. But the reason why they do that is because not everybody gets everything at the same time. Whereas a lot of these other platforms are, like I said, software as a service. Everyone's on the same version. Everyone's looking at the same thing. And that to me is a major benefit compared to Active. And then beyond that, I would say the back end probably on Active is one of the most confusing user interfaces I think I've ever seen in a software.
It is.
It is. And I say that from a standpoint as being someone who's very, very technologically friendly. I would have a hard time actually coming forward and training a staff member on how to use it because it's more often what you don't have to do in Active that's harder to figure out than what you do have to do. For example, inputting in a facility, you have 30 options. You really only need to fill in 4 boxes, and that's it. But you have all these options in front of you, so it's almost like it's asking you to do more, and you don't have to. So that was my impression of the software when I first got started here. And going forward, it hasn't really gotten any better.
Got it. Karen, did you get to use it? What were your thoughts?
Definitely. I mean, after using ActiveNet for 15 years, it's definitely something that's more familiar to me. So, but the user, as I mentioned, the user interface of SmartRec was huge. It was immediate, and a lot of our questions come from customers who have trouble using it. They'll go on there and they'll go, and then we have to kind of walk them through it. So that's a big factor.
Yeah, I noticed too when I was signing my daughter up for swim lessons that I was having some difficulty even making reservations. So that's really exciting to hear. And if staff is happy with it, and it seems, well, I mean, anything honestly at this point was better than ActiveNet. But I'm just excited that they're able to find something that will work. And I think especially for the customer service representatives, that's really important since that is such a large chunk of their time.
Anybody else? Any questions?
I was just going to ask, you said the SmartRec, the back end is pretty user-friendly as well.
Yes, actually. So, and I do mean it when I say that the user interface on the back end is the exact same as the one that the customer sees. So, and I know I could have included a photograph, for example, but it was really hard to explain via a photograph what the user interface looks like. But if you, after this meeting, depending on which direction the board decides to go, one of the options or one of the recommendations they use, I believe, was the city of Grapevine, Texas, was an option. So if you do feel like doing some Googling, you can check that out there. But overall, the user interface on the back end is very much kind of point of sale focused. So it has a lot to do with making sure that the customer service representatives are able to basically help complete transactions if they're even needed to do so.
That's good. So if you need to modify it or do anything like that, it should be able to be done in-house versus, asking for a contractor or hiring someone from, additional hours on top of that from SmartRec
So that's actually
to help us build that out. That's something we could handle in-house.
That's actually a good point. So they don't actually offer customizations to the platform. That's what I meant when everybody sees the same exact thing. There are different things you can turn on, turn off. However, the options you have on the back end and setting up the point of sale, those are all immediately presented to you. You have that option to do that, and you don't see anything more than you need. That is a big difference compared to ActiveNet, because ActiveNet, like I said, it basically shows you everything under the sun. You may not need all of it, but it always shows you what it is. So the other item, though, and I don't want to sell the platform short. They do take requests for certain features. However, those are like a wish list item. So if the staff has been using the software in such a way that they feel like it could be improved, you can send that in to the company, and they'll take it into consideration. And they operate very much like a tech company. They do coding days and see things like that, and see what they can build out and see what's cool and what's not. And if it's deemed usable or useful to their clients, they'll roll it out to everyone.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I really appreciate that model for software as a service and, essentially crowdsourcing or utilizing the knowledge of many to improve their product for everyone else as well. So I think that's a good model going forward for any system that we use like that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Elaine?
I like the idea that everybody's on the same version, kind of like Springbrook. When it's updated, everybody's updated. We don't have to be updated 7 months later or whenever we decide that we want to. Is it connected to a credit card company?
So Amelia is the overall parent company, and they are a, I don't remember the exact term. I believe it's in the proposal itself, but they are not considered a credit card processor.
Okay.
However, they do have it's like PMI compliance or something like that. Basically, they'll transmit information entirely confidentially, and they can have that compliance in place that states that they follow certain protocols and procedures to make sure that transaction data is encrypted and secure to whatever processor you